Yes, welcome back. Now, look, thousands of pro-Palestine protesters are taking advantage of International Women's Day. And I spoke earlier with Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy to discuss Hamas's barbaric acts done against women, how they've been ignored, and I also wanted to get an update on some of the Israeli hostages who are sadly still in those Hamas tunnels as well. I asked him initially about what his reaction was for the Feminists for Palestine movement today.
Pretty pathetic to see people marching for Hamas rapists and calling it liberation. I mean, what do they think the Hamas terrorists who perpetrated the barbaric atrocities of October 7th are? Freedom rapists? We know that right now Hamas is raping the hostages in the terror tunnels. That's what the UN said in its special report about the sexual atrocities of October 7th. By the way, not only against women, against men as well. That's what the survivors of Hamas captivity are telling us.
Yeah, I wanted to know what actually were some of the atrocities that have happened to the women. Just a disclaimer, obviously, you know, this is distressing stuff, but I do think it is important to get it across.
Disturbing findings of the UN Special Representative for Sexual Violence in Conflict. She found that on October 7th, Hamas not only committed acts of rape, not only gang rape, but acts of necrophilia on 2 occasions, raping the bodies of the victims it murdered. Hamas used sexual violence in a clear, widespread and systematic manner on October 7th and is still subjecting the poor hostages we haven't heard a word from in over 150 days.
The argument by a lot of these Feminists for Palestine movement is that this is a patriarchal war. OK, and Israel is blocking aid in Gaza, sanitary products. They can't get in, apparently.
To bring down Hamas so it can't do it again and to bring back the hostages. Now, the people who are currently denying the sexual atrocities, covering up the sex crimes of the Hamas rapist regime, it's because they want to believe that Hamas are their heroes. They want to believe that the terrorists who committed those barbarities are freedom fighters and fighting for liberation.
Also, I wondered if it was fair to say that Hamas doesn't actually treat their own female citizens that well.
Is itself the very definition of violent patriarchy. I don't think they have very many women leaders. They systematically oppress all minorities in the Gaza Strip, certainly LGBT people, but also women as well. This is a deeply conservative, deeply patriarchal society.
Yeah, and a lot of people here are, as we know, out on the streets. We'll have more of it tomorrow, won't we? Saying, oh, look, come on, we need a ceasefire now. We need a ceasefire now. I just wanted to know where we were up to in terms of Hamas actually wanting a ceasefire and how the negotiations are going.
I want to see a temporary pause in the fighting that will enable us to get hostages out, although ultimately this war will end with either the surrender or the defeat of Hamas. We are not going to leave Hamas in power in the Gaza Strip when it is threatening to perpetrate the October 7 atrocities again and again. But Hamas has an opportunity right now to stop the fighting temporarily in order to let hostages out, and it doesn't want to do that. But it is plain that Hamas is not interested in taking that opportunity for a pause in the fighting. Hamas is determined to fight to the last man standing.
Yes, indeed. And look, tomorrow, despite what Rishi Sunak says and despite the police saying that they are going to continue to manage these protests, we're going to end up with more protests, aren't we? We're going to end up with more people coming out saying we need a ceasefire now, saying that clearly the only issue about ceasefire is that Israel aren't allowing a ceasefire, despite Hamas clearly not wanting one either. And as it is International Women's Day again, I just wanted to, yet again, remind people of some of the atrocities that Hamas have been committing against women. And just to think as well about, all right, in this context, it's Hamas and it's in the Gaza Strip and it's all of that stuff. But really think about that part of the world and that region of the world, OK, and whether or not feminist groups do enough to call out the barbaric acts that take place against women in that region, really, with Israel arguably being the kind of only exception.
The hostages are 19 women. The survivors are telling us the most shocking stories about rape at gunpoint, about how Hamas is dressing up the women as dolls and treating them as puppets on string, There was one hostage who came back and said that some of the women hostages are missing their periods. And she can only hope that it's the body's defensive mechanism shutting itself down so they can't get pregnant, and not that they are already pregnant by their captors. That is what we are talking about.
It's worth bearing that in mind, I think, tomorrow, if people are considering going on some of these marches, and certainly the Feminists for Palestine movement as well. That was Eylon Levy there, the spokesman for the Israeli government.